introduction in the chat. That's our roll call, and welcome everybody today.
Can anyone hear Penny? I can't. Okay, it's me.
Penny, I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear Penny.
I can hear her too.
That's going to be uncomfortable if Micah can't hear. Turn up your volume. She's hearing the rest of you.
Well, it is being recorded, so she can get the.
It's
get
not
it off.
quite the same. All right.
I know.
I'm back. I can hear. I don't know what's going on with my computer.
Oh, great.
I'll mute myself.
That's a big relief. Yay. Okay. We have a big agenda today, so let's hit it. First, I would like someone to motion to approve said agenda.
Moved, Josh.
Second, BJ.
Second, CJ. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that sounds like enough for me. Motion approved. Treasurer's report.
All right. This will be quick and painless. So since our last meeting, we have got the last 4 schools in from the site license, and then renewed the Quicken license and got taxes done. So our current balance is $30,312.63. That will go down for the next meeting as we get Amy and Penny reimbursed for the trip to Utah.
Make a note to turn that in.
Yeah, and we can talk offline on that. We'll figure that out. That's a work in progress as to how we'll do that. But any questions on that? I do have a little bit more about the site license, but that's on as a separate agenda item later on.
Sounds good. Do we have to approve that?
No.
No.
Okay. The first thing I put on was setting up meeting dates for 2022. Everybody got your calendar handy? Or actually, do we have a December meeting? No, it'd be January, wouldn't it?
January.
Okay. Is there any day that works better than others? Today is a Tuesday, which is unusual for us, but do you want to go back to Wednesday, Thursday?
The good and the bad is we do those lunch and learns on Wednesdays, and I always hit a board meeting on an alternate Wednesday. It does keep IGIC activities on Wednesdays, which might be easier for people to remember. But if Wednesday's a conflict for someone, then it's just always a conflict for everything, and that kind of sucks.
Yeah, I prefer not to conflict with our lunch and learn. I think that's our big draw these days.
I mean, the lunch and learns are easy enough to move around meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Just to another Wednesday. Or we have it right after a meeting even.
I like to separate them. I'll be honest with you. I think since we're only meeting mostly online, I see it better to spread out a little bit and really keep the lunch and learns like topical and for everybody, not to do IGIC business.
Yeah, I like that too.
I guess the biggest question is, does anyone have a conflict with, anyone have a big problem with not keeping them on Wednesdays? Maybe that's just the easiest way to go about it.
If we're going to go back to in person at some point, I have Wednesday is a day I report to the Board of Supervisors, but it's only once a month, so hopefully we could miss it. Especially if we're going to do, say, January 19th. That one would be fine. Any objections to January 19th for our next meeting? Okay, moving on to April. 20th?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Do we,
When's
rather
Magic?
than July, we'll meet at June at
Oh.
the ITAG?
Well, we kind of just the ITAG one's just kind of a
Oh, get together?
informal thing.
So we're
but-
going to meet in July as well? July 20th?
Matt, when's the Esri users conference?
I don't remember. Let me pull it up.
Hey, can we back up, guys? I was
Yep.
taking notes. April? We're talking April 20th, right?
Yeah, that'd be the week after Magic.
I may not be available. So as secretary, that's always like someone else is gonna have to do it.
I would prefer to do it when you're here, so.
There's a GIST conference that Brad goes to. It's the national conference, and I may be attending that also that week.
We want
And
to do
when's
it
Magic?
earlier, the 13th?
That's Magic.
That's Magic.
Well, that, I won't even be available. So while we're looking 27th,
27th, yeah. I think that would be my preference. I hate to make one person dictate, but since no one else wants to take the minutes.
no, we prefer,
Because you'd be gone that whole week.
Yeah. Yeah, it's most of the week.
so then July 27th,
July 20th, I think.
20th, okay.
And then be after the UC, so that would work.
Okay.
October 19th,
October 19th. Looks good.
okay. Oh, and then do we need a December?
We wouldn't go till January, so you're good.
Okay, that's it. Then it won't be my problem anymore. Okay, let's move along. Education Committee report. We have Robin with us today. Do not see. Yep, there's Robin. McNeely, you listening in? You know?
Robin.
Well,
Yes,
okay.
Robin, what?
What? You're on the agenda.
Oh,
Education Committee.
sorry, I didn't see that. Yes, I'm busy trying to pack up my office and I thought I was just listening in today. I will. Here we go. I know Amy and Penny and Debbie have been having discussions about K-12 outreach and resource information creation, sharing what GIS is and et cetera. Penny, did you already explain your visit to the Boone School?
Actually, my visit happened this morning and I did not talk about it. I'll
Oh.
give you a brief little summary. Pretty
Thanks.
much they'd like me to move in and work for them full time for free.
Excellent.
This was a resource they didn't know existed until last year when I worked with their ag instructor, and this year their ag instructor is going to want to do something on the remote farming stuff, that precision ag.
Oh,
So they might like me to help, but their question that I was not prepared for, and I should have been, is when you usually work with schools, do you come in and work directly with the students, or do you work with the teachers, or how do you do that? And I said, first time we're going to play it by ear, I guess. So we'll start with working with the teachers and go on. But they were very enthused with all of the educational components that Esri has put together, that they can utilize in the pre-built lessons, all the
Right.
structured, and the fact that they work with the Iowa Code and the National Code of Education, so they can check things off as they go. So they're pretty exciting. And I talked about setting up, and maybe their computer science teacher could be involved. They don't have a computer science teacher. They said it's hard to get computer science teachers because they can go to industry and make more money. So
yeah, that's true.
and it's just not part of the curriculum per se. So I could sense the perhaps you can pick up the slack coming from them, and it was a little scary. I already have
Yeah.
a job and a quarter. I don't really need
You don't need
another.
another full-time?
They were really thrilled and excited. So
Well, that was basically what I expected to hear. I mean, that's kind of what you hope to hear, right? That they see this new resource and they're all excited about using it. They just need the help to be shown how it could fit in, which is sort of the point of doing that kind of outreach. There's been no work on trying to do or set up training for IGIC members. I have nothing in that area to talk about. It's basically been focusing on trying to do the get resources together for the K-12 education side.
the colleges have more things going as far as GIS education goes. They generally have staff people in classes and whatnot, so they're not quite
Right.
as needy.
Does anyone think that is there like a specific driving need for any particular type of training for IGIC members that was not well, not that you'd know what was, presented in the questionnaire, but the obvious things. We've done the field maps, lunch and learn. People have had exposure to pro. Any particular thoughts on what other trainings we could offer to members? I'm thinking these days it'd have to be remote somehow.
I've been getting into quick capture, and that's a lot of fun.
You did mention that to me, yes. Do you see that being maybe more applicable or equally but differently for cities, counties?
It is different in that it's a big button, one button push kind of data collection thing. In fact, I think I've got mine open.
Do you think it would be worth having a lunch and learn on that application specifically?
So it's
Robin, I
big
do think
button-
that could be very useful as a lunch and
big
learn. It's a
button
nice.
collection for
Okay.
quick things like this. This is our conservation. When they've got issues, they need an electrical fix, they need a campsite fix, they've got litter problem, they've got
Right.
tree problems, whatever, road problems. This captures it on a map for them. They can take pictures, they can put in some little notes, and so they don't forget what it is and where it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then it connects up to the workforce app, so they can see where all their people are. They can assign these items to a particular staff member. They can give it a priority level. There's all kinds of, and our conservation, when I set them up with that last year, just absolutely loved it. And I think it would be a nice thing. I can see our engineers doing something like this. I built them a map and for field data collection, but this is so much handier. Just on your phone, punch a button, take a quick picture, and then when you get back to the office, you assign somebody to go fix whatever it is that you just found that needs fixing. We're using it. I'm using it with the schools for mapping. I built one for one of their students who wants to map trails in our local parks.
Yeah. I know we could always go to ESRI and have them do that kind of presentation.
Yeah.
But sometimes it is kind of nice to hear from one of the members how it's.
Well, I
being
think
used.
it would be nice to have Esri come in or maybe Chase is good.
Yeah.
Do a quick capture workforce, a quick, setup and they have
Okay.
made it easier for setting up. It was pretty simple. I even created the database for it in ArcGIS Online.
So if I talk to Chase and he's going to do that, because I don't see how he can say no, right?
Right.
Would you be willing to do a short piece at the end to just briefly show how you're using that in Boone? Penny,
Sure.
so one person can, so we can see one person's application in Iowa?
Yep.
Okay.
Robin,
Yeah,
I'm really, and this is to everybody, I am needing lunch and learn topics.
Oh,
I
there we
don't have
go.
much going into the next year. I really like to set them out 3 and 4 months in advance.
Right.
So,
Well, we'll do the quick caption and whenever you've got a spot that you need to fill, Amy and I will do a lunch and learn on our Utah trip because it's
Okay.
too much to fit in a short little discussion here.
I do kind of wonder if you start, like you mentioned, workforce, you start looking through the Esri suite of apps, and I could see some kind of a lunch and learn exposure on several of those apps and how they integrate, because a lot of us are aware of this one or that one, and some of the integration is easy and some is not. But I don't, between the membership and Matt and resources that we have at Esri, I think that could be something that might be kind of useful, like maybe for 2022, kind of say, we'll have topical things. We might have to redo census. Oh, I don't know if we'll do recense, but anyway, topical things. But interspersed with that, I would love to see maybe an exposure to a bunch of different Esri apps that have really starting to come into their own.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful, especially for people, and I'm one of those also, who you've heard of stuff, you kind of know what it does, but you don't have time to actually see how hopefully easy it is to set up, and specific applications where then you could say, yeah, that's something I need to do. So Matt, I'm assuming I can just contact Chase directly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Alright.
And he won't be able to say no, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Good.
And Robin, I really like how you suggested working with Chase and Penny together.
Mhm.
And I think to that point, we could, if you wanted it, we could have every month be an Esri lunch and learn. I don't think that's probably the best approach, and I certainly don't want it to become the Esri show.
Yeah.
I think that it's a lot more. Things resonate a lot more with users when we talk about that relationship and how Penny, you've been successful with using that in your organization. So I would, please reach out to Chase or anyone directly, or reach out to me, and we can, put you in touch with the right folks to get some lunch and learns together. But yeah,
Good.
use us as much or as little as you want.
Wonderful. Okay.
Okay. Anything more on the education committee?
Is there anything else you want to add, Amy, about your conversations with Debbie? Or Debbie, I guess I don't know if she's on or not. I haven't.
Yeah, she is.
I'm here.
Okay, I see you
I
are
was,
further on the agenda too.
yes, I was just wondering if anyone had informed the IGIC Council about our partnership with Lori Rubino Hare from the Northern Arizona University. We collaborated with her, Amy and I, and we all talked about it. Penny, I think we all talked about a grant she wrote that would provide more training for Iowa teachers interested in mapping. So more intense training through the Iowa STEM Scale Up program. We wrote letters of support, but she did all the grant writing. So we thought it was a good partnership at the time.
Hey, Debbie, who was that person again?
Lori
Spell?
Rubino, Rubino -Hare, Hare.
Well, how do you spell Lori? Because
Lori is Lori.
perfect. Thank you. And she's with the what organization?
Yeah, she's with Northern Arizona University in the Center for Science Teaching and Learning. So
Okay. Flagstaff.
she reached out to us from referrals from Esri educators. So for Iowa.
We could definitely use some mapping training for educators in Boone County.
And I tell you what, it's going to be a very good one, I believe. So she calls it the power of data.
Sounds good. How do we get on board?
Well, she sent the grant in and I haven't heard anything. Amy, have you heard anything?
I don't know
I-
if they've decided yet.
Yeah,
I think
I
she'll
don't-
let us know. I think it's
Yeah.
maybe late October, early November.
Yeah, because I thought it was October at some time, but I thought it was late, so. The grant went in September, the first or second week, I think,
The 13th.
the 13th there. So we'll
Okay.
keep you informed.
Great. Okay, moving on. State of Iowa activities. Patrick wants to tell us about boundary annexation surveys and what, national address data set submission? Something.
Correct.
I translated it into acronym or
That's fine.
name, forgot what they were.
That works. So I am going to, I can't share my screen.
Yeah, give me a second.
Okay.
Josh, the wizard man, will set you up.
I figured that what might be the case.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Let's do this one.
There it is.
Okay. So this census, I just spoke with them yesterday, and we'll speak to get them again today. The state is about, or that the Census Bureau is about ready to undertake boundary and annexation survey 2022 starting in January. I think that date, what they said, don't hold me to it, is going to
Already,
actually.
didn't we just do that?
I know, right? They're actually pushing it forward a little or backward a little bit. It's going to be January 10th or that week, I think. So there's a little bit more time. And then first submission in March, and then final submission. First submission in March, which would be the date to get included for the ACS, American Community Survey inclusion, and then April or May is the final date for that. The state, through Department of Revenue, signed if you look at this, it's not on there yet, but the state has a consolidated boundary and annexation survey agreement with Census that is now in place. That's signed by both Census and Department of Revenue, and that should be up there this week sometime. But what that really means is that I spoke about this a couple times over the last couple of years. It gives the state an opportunity to submit on behalf of local governments their boundary and annexation survey information. This does not obligate, either a county or a city to actually go through the state. We just ask that you communicate with us because that's what Census is asking us to do. They prefer consolidated boundary submissions. It's just easier on their end. So this year we're kind of taking a hybrid approach, and through I've been working with the City Development Board, which takes care of the annexations, final approval of annexations within 2 miles of an existing incorporated city, if there is multiple cities within that 2 mile area, or the Secretary of State's office for all other annexations through those two entities to get the list of annexations that have occurred in the state in 2021, and those annexations that may be on the books for 2020 but didn't get approved by the Secretary of State until after the January 1st, 2021 deadline. So there's a handful of those communities that didn't get included in last year's. So what we're doing this year is taking an approach of providing a list of those annexations and the handful of dissolutions that have occurred in the state during 2021. And then Also, there are a handful of counties that I will be submitting the annexation information to Census through the state. There is a web page up that explains some of the things that are going on with this. It's actually not active yet. I'll send out this, but it's a census boundary and annexation survey that describes the process and frequently asked questions that I've gotten from counties or communities themselves. Some of those big questions of do we have to participate through the state? It's like, no. If you or Des Moines, West Des Moines, larger communities that are handling the BAS survey on your own, you're welcome to continue to do that. We will send a list of those annexations to Census, but you do not have to actually go through the state if you don't want to. Just let me know if you're actually going to submit on your own so they can communicate that to Census. So some of those bigger things, there'll be some other information, dates, that sort of thing that'll be up here eventually. A template for submitting data. So if you don't want to go through GUPS, you don't have to. Some different things like that I've been working with Census on. Any questions about BAS before I go on to the next little piece?
When will that be sent out, Patrick? The information website. When would that be out?
I will probably send out a message to IGIC in the next week or so. I have some things to talk through and populate this page a little bit more. We're getting actually sort of a quick web map of where annexations have occurred in the state in 2021. The whole basis for people who don't know this of why this happened is Iowa's got a very well established and very good process for annexations in the state. There's a great workflow. The problem is that information was not necessarily flowing to the census, and the state had no obligation to send that to the census. But I think there were communities that thought or assumed that Iowa was making those submissions to the census. And they were not. And so a couple of years ago, we went through the Boundary Quality and Reconciliation Program through Census to update boundaries prior to the 2020 census in order to fix some of those omissions that occurred that had not been submitted, let's say by a city clerk or other official particularly in cities. I think it's fine. I think anything that was being done by the counties, I think, we were finding it was really good data. The problem was in some of the independent cities or where there was not an agreement within a county, that data was not making it to census. And so we had those corrections done, and those should have been visible to people prior to this 2020 census. And from what I heard, I got a few responses that needed to be corrected last minute. But I think for the most part, those changes were good changes that were done by myself, Lori at the DOT, and then Census Bureau, their contractor. So that's why this actual agreement is in place now. It's not to get in the way of getting data there, but just making sure that the state is part of that process of getting data to the census, because it's such an important. Those boundaries are important for a lot of reasons.
So Patrick, can I ask a practical question?
Yep.
So if a county or city either doesn't know how to do it or thinks that updating BAS is a pain in the rear, and there's been an annexation for one of their cities in a county, and it's gone through all those processes, because you can't just change the boundaries without a ton of paperwork, public hearings, blah blah blah. Does the county have to, what's the county minimally obligated to do to say, yeah, the state's good, they can just use their data, I'm fine with that?
Nothing really at this point. I mean, we're aware now that an annexation has occurred, and it has been mapped at least to the standards of the DOT and for their business needs. which are slightly different than Census, but I think we're talking with Lori and Census. We found that those data are good enough. The business needs for both Census and the DOT, of basically, inventorying roads, whether or not, county or state funds are obligated for those roads, which is the primary purpose of the DOT component of that, and Census, which is making sure structures are within that boundary, or households, that they're close enough. And so we're just doing spot checking, and if we can get the local data, if it's mapped, we reach out, or we'll be reaching out for that data. Otherwise we will probably just use the DOT change polygons for that. So if a community doesn't want to do it or don't feel they have the expertise, you know, like I said, first cut this year is going to be sending a list. Next year we'll be working more closely with those communities that we know have not responded. That Census has, typically they know which counties have a low response rate for BAS and have to follow up quite a bit. And so that's going to be our next year's sort of target area.
Early on here, I set up a group with all the agreement with every city, incorporated city within Boone County, that I would submit on their behalf. They were thrilled to have me do that at no charge.
And I think that's the case, because especially those smaller communities don't have the resources to do this on their own. It really comes down to the city clerk that ends up, I think, from who I've talked to, of who's supposed to be reporting this, because that's kind of the end of the chain of the annexation process itself. And so, yeah, I agree with you, Penny. That's been the case. And I don't remember if Boone has a formal CBAS agreement with Census or not, but I think it really doesn't matter. If you want to continue doing that, I think that's fine. But yeah, so if there is a question, I could, I'm fielding, these frequently asked questions and getting those up there, from things that I've had in the past. And we'll continue to put additional information up there if wading through things that are sort of critical needs from the state perspective of, for local governments to get that information, how to report and things like that. So the next thing is actually, let's see, the next thing is the national address database. And I'm not sure, I honestly don't know how many people are aware of this or not, that this is going on. But this is an effort that's been sort of in the works for several years now, 5+ years at least, been on paper, and people have been talking about it. It finally found a steward several years ago, with at least the primary steward of this is the U.S. Department of Transportation. And they're basically working with the FGGC, which is NGAC, which is National Geospatial, I can't remember, something commission, an offshoot of the FGGC that looks at standards of data and stuff like that. So they're looking at an address standard, which basically at this point is the NENA standard with probably a few enhancements. And so Iowa, through Homeland Security and the Next Gen 911 data, has submitted a couple of times to the National Address Database. And right now it's mostly complete. I think the NG 911 data is complete for the state, or close to completion, but it's not reflected right now in the National Address Database. But you can see the status map here. Last submission was August 2021. I think they're getting ready for version 8 of that data. I think being submitted either really soon or within the next couple of weeks. Yeah, and so this next map, you can see, you know, there's a couple holes, a couple counties missing for Iowa, along the edges and borders. I think that's actually complete at this point. But that standard, if you're interested in it, is on this page, and I will paste this in here in the chat in a second. But it has the schema associated with it. So if anybody's familiar with the Next Gen 901 NINA or the NINA standard, it looks similar to the address data in there. There are holes in the Iowa data just because it hasn't been completely flushed out with some of the identifying the type of point it is, things like whether it's a rooftop, an entrance, access point, things like that. And then also one of the big things that I think we need to add value to this that is slowly being flushed out is the type of address. You know, is this a multi-use address? Is it residential, commercial, that sort of thing? For me, that's really important. And I'll explain a use case of how my office is going to use this in a second. But what I wanted to show you really quickly is there is a map that has basically aggregated by Uber H3 hexagons, the number of points per hexagon and the various submitted data sets that are our public data. So in Iowa, you can zoom in here and see the number of locations then that are at a particular within a particular hexagon. So, you know, Des Moines metro area, there's 150,531 address structure locations at that within that hexagon. And as you actually zoom in, then you'll be able to start seeing the actual address points, and you can download this data from the this location. You can actually download the NAD if you want to. But you can see then, you know, how at least in this county, you can see these are probably all access points. And if I click on one of these locations, and this is not being critical of the data. This is a huge effort by any means, and I think people should be really excited, to where this is. This is a data set that's in development, but you can see things like address type and address placement is unknown in this case. But if you zoom to another, let's say another county, let's go zoom into Polk County because they're a little bit different. You can see that all the placements of these are more or less either parcel centroid or rooftop. And so if you click on a location, I'm not sure if these are attributed yet or not. So you can see that the address type is unknown. Most likely it's residential. But then going through and it's the address placement is the structure rooftop. But this could also be structure parcel centroid.
Hey, Patrick, can you send a link of that map?
Yep, I'll send both of these through the chat. Yep.
Thanks.
So how we're looking to do this. So my office and a lot of my time recently has been involved in broadband grants, awarding grants and taking in applications and development of the statewide broadband map. And so one of the things we're going to do hopefully in the next 12 to 18 months is actually move that map from a census block view to one that basically shows whether or not a particular location has broadband access based on granular data that we get from a third-party vendor and some of the infrastructure data that comes along in that. So basically trying to attribute every single one of these locations with presence absence of broadband availability at a particular location, to try to get a better view, and hopefully look at ways that we can get better access, especially to these these areas, you know, way out here, more rural areas, less dense areas. I think if anybody has spent any time, you know, looking at broadband data, you can, it's fraught with errors just because of the way it's reported to FCC, which is at the block level. And so, you know, there's, I think the big complaint is that people just see that it's an overestimation of what's actually out in the wild. And so we think this view then, why this data for us is important, and why that data of getting attribution on these points of whether this is a residential, commercial, industrial, multi-residential sort of situation is critically important to understand who's actually getting served within the community. And that's why, you know, some of these other attributes that are still being flushed out and trying to triangulate on what that classification of that particular location is critically important for not only state business, but I think local businesses as well, and ultimately citizens. So, but that's all I have. And if you have questions about the national address database, you can either email me or like I said, I'll put those links in the chat right now.
Thanks, Patrick. Good stuff. Next up, our Utah GIS conference mini report, Amy.
Hi. So last week, Monday through Friday, Penny and I went to Bryce Canyon, Utah, to the Utah Geographic Information Council annual conference. And some of my big takeaways were kind of looking for the user experience to understand how they run their conference, and kind of picking up some differences or session. I went to some sessions that were specifically focused on the user experience. One I attended was called How to Attend a UGIC Conference. And it was kind of like given by a seasoned UGIC member, and he talked about like kind of 5 different points of the conference, including things like going to presentations and talking about like how to get the most out of vendor presentations, and the map gallery, which they have a a more robust map gallery than we do. And then also they suggested like talking about how to meet people at UGIC, and so that was a really great presentation, and I thought there were some things we could consider taking away from that. Another one that I went to was focused on mentoring the next generation, which was also very beneficial. And the one that Penny and I both attended that was very interesting, they have a live contest called the Iron Cartographer. And it's kind of somewhat similar to Iron Chef, where there's 2 contestants, and they have about, I think maybe like 3 or 4 hours to make a map on the fly. I mean, there's parameters, and they give you kind of a data set and some stock images to start with, but then they let them loose, and then at the end of the contest, you can vote for the Iron Cartographer. It seemed like a little bit of a high pressure situation, but it was also somewhat entertaining, and they had someone emceeing it too.
Could you see everything that was being done on the screens?
Yeah, or so it was about like an hour and a half session, and then they had like another 2 hours to work on it after the session was over. And also during that time, there were jokes. So Penny and I both shared some good GIS jokes. And we also, there were a few people that shared about the data set and how it was created from the Utah, their main like mapping and data distribution group. I don't know the acronym right now, but so that was something interesting. Another thing that I mentioned before was the map gallery. This included student posters, professional posters, also small posters, like, and they had another category that was Utah as art. And this included, and if you come to our presentation, we might show you some of the
That was
pictures.
amazing.
They had like all different kinds of art forms. So one of them was a huge board that had the map of the world, and it was kind of like how you would see it if it was satellite imagery, but the man had done it in all different colors of moss, and that was really cool. There was another one that somebody did a topographic map of a mountain, and it was all layers of paper. At first I thought it was 3D printed, but it was layers of like cardstock, and some of them were like, you know, pretty thick. So those were some interesting things.
Yeah, one of their map categories was for an interactive map, so you had to have a URL or a QR code, so something you've done for maybe ArcGIS Online or whatever. So I thought that was a cool new category.
Yeah. Are there other things you want to talk about, Penny?
Now I'm saving it all, except this, that having a half day for hiking as part of your conference was a really nice touch, maybe.
So are we doing a lunch and learn? Is that when you say you're saving it? Okay, so we should probably
Yes.
get that on the calendar. I would love to get that on the calendar. Did we set the date already for that?
Nope.
No.
Okay, I didn't think
Whatever-
we had, but I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page.
Yes.
We could do it
Whenever
for
you want,
November, December.
Well, I was thinking of doing, we've got November's.
Okay.
Or maybe, I don't know. I'll be in touch with you guys. I don't need to take up time right now.
Okay.
It'll be sometime between now and maybe January. I cannot remember if I totally scheduled the rest of the year, or we might start January that way.
Yeah.
So we'll get you. We'll get you.
Okay. Enough for now. We're slipping behind schedule, so
Okay.
give you the rest of the good stuff at the Lunch and Learn. Site license, Josh.
Well, I'll get us caught back up here. So the current way the site license works is that, or how it has in the past, is that the larger schools, the 3 Regents universities, have their own MyEsri organization underneath the IGIC MyEsri site. With Esri's, with how they redid their licensing a couple years ago, they allowed all schools underneath the site licenses to have their own MyEsri site. So I've been working with all the other schools to set up their own, because I think it's a very good thing to have their own and not have to rely on somebody else to create licenses, to set up, you know, support tickets. That way it can just stay within each school. So of the 11 schools, then overall with the site license, 9 are either set up or have said they wanted to get set up. I'm still waiting. One of the other 2 is looking through some training stuff that I gave them to figure out if they wanted to go that route, and then the other one I just need to hear back from. So in regards to that, normally IGIC has provided $250 of towards support for the site license. $250 to Iowa State to cover my time to deal with the administration of it, 250 to Central for Anya to deal with the licensing aspect for the schools, and 250 to Northeast Iowa Community College for Tad Muller to essentially be the support contact for those small schools. Given that there will only be 2 schools left that would need to be actually supported by IGIC potentially, I think it's time that we look at that breakdown again, because essentially Anya will not need to be doing the licenses, and Tad is actually retiring at the end of this year, so it was perfect timing to say that he wouldn't need to be the support contact for the small schools. I am willing to take on for those 2 other schools because I don't think the support, the odds of needing to put in a support ticket is going to be real heavy on that, and it's not too difficult to create a license once it's paid to send to them. So this is going to need to be voted on most likely, and it doesn't need to be voted on now. I'm just presenting the idea. So then it would take away the 250 from Central and Northeast, and I gave them a heads up a couple years ago when Esri redid their licensing, so they knew that this was coming. And then to tack on those couple items, I would probably, maybe say that Iowa State gets a little bit more than 250. What amount that is, I don't know. But willing to hear ideas as to what people think about that part.
Once we find out whether those other 2 schools go with Esri or not, if they do, then we got nothing left.
Yeah, it would just be essentially, it would just be my, I'm still got the time to be the administrator of it, to to talk to Esri, because IGIC is still the parent umbrella of all the schools.
Right.
Should we keep the 250 to ISU for that?
I would say that yes. And so if it was, but if there's that little bit then to take care of the licensing and stuff, then I would say it would probably be higher than that.
Josh, can you put together like a recommendation, like a motion to plan for that in January-ish, and maybe have a better idea of those last remaining schools?
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay, moving on. Q&A about advice on the IHCC geographical program. Did anybody do their homework and read up on those? We'll let Debbie give us a quick overview.
And thank you for putting that on. We don't get enough people to really make good decisions. And since I couldn't make it to IGIC's or to the ITAG conference this year, I didn't get to ask questions. So 2 questions only. The first one is the push to migrate to ArcGIS Pro. We're getting pushed pretty hard in education as well to start using that instead of ArcMap. So I'm wondering, is it worth it for us to continue teaching? Right now, I teach ArcMap in the Intro to GIS as well as online. And then Brian and I are using ArcMap and ArcPro in the other courses where we have tutorials or things that we can use. We're getting the students involved, and some students that are brand new like ArcPro better. So we want to know, what do our professionals want when we send these kids out into the workplace? Do you want us to keep teaching some ArcMap for a little while longer? I believe, was it 2026 when they're stopping all support of that from Esri?
March of 2026.
March of 2026, okay.
So technically, yes, but my feeling is switch to Pro as soon as you're comfortable doing that, because that's what the new students are learning here at the university. We all know that's where the software is going.
Okay.
Unless there's a compelling reason to teach them desktop, and there could be multiple reasons. I think they just need to be learning what's coming and get up to speed on that. It would be doing them a disservice to teach them desktop and have them get comfortable with that, and then have them switch to Pro when they could just start with Pro,
Right.
you know, right off the bat.
Debbie, can you see the comments that are coming in?
I
If you-
can.
If you,
Yeah.
yeah, so there's a lot. And
I'll-
I think overwhelming from somebody who is in a county and now private industry, once you get out of the legacy tools, third-party vendor tools, their Pro is where it's at for sure. And exposing is, I think it's a lot easier. If you find that one process you have to do in ArcMap, you could teach those few steps to do it. You know, like a staff person could do it.
Right.
If they were to get hired and they had really good pro skills and they're like, oh, I don't have a lot of exposure to ArcMap, I don't think that's really going to deter most employers at
Okay.
this point. I think that would actually be like a positive sign.
I also sent the message to the people normally on our advisory board list. And one got back to me and said the only concern their group has, he works with utilities, is that everything they have is in ArcMap. And so the legacy part of it concerns him, although they are using something called Arc Engine to adapt some of their mapping for the future, so they can use it in Arc Pro, if I understand correctly. So they are looking at all of these different places that I've talked to that yeah, they know they're coming to Arc Pro. So, but I kind of wanted input from you, so I will go with what I have here. If anybody has anything else, you're welcome to email me too. So I'll be putting minutes together from our discussion for my advisory board. And I think my boss is on there, Daniel Terrian. So Daniel, I'll get that.
Okay, thanks.
All right. The second question is, we are proposing, and we talked a little bit about this, I believe it was in May, with a small group of people from IGIC. And we have combined our raster-based data and data acquisition and analysis course into one. So we will be developing a new 3-credit course to insert into that empty slot. And we were looking at trends, and we came up with some following: GIS for decision makers, which the students learn mostly using Arc Online, and they do some research, ethics, things like that, and create their own projects. These are 12-week courses, by the way, 11 to 12 weeks, so not a full semester, but a term. The second one we talked about was location analytics, because that could be used in just about any, scenario. And then GIS and agriculture, because we are a rural state and there's a lot of conservation and farming practices, precision ag, all of that. And then we wondered if you had other suggestions or if you had any advice on which one you thought might be good. Do we need something in those others? Do we have any gaps? So that's the second question.
Debbie, I really like Greg Jamison's comments about maybe a WebJS, and I read all the stuff, but I did not follow the link to see your current program.
Yep.
And I have found in my industry, there's a disconnect from users on, they may understand desktop,
Uh-huh.
and they may have had some exposure, some WebJS a little bit, but they don't know how to work within both. Like how to fluidly, in Pro, of course, is really designed for that. So that kind of goes along with the Pro. So I really liked what he said about all those applications and how you can kind of migrate seamlessly between the two. So I know Penny has a lot of experience with some of your users are working in the cloud environment and some of your users are working in a desktop environment, and they can all be kind of working together. I don't know if you have a class about that.
Yep. Okay. So that's good advice. We don't have a specific website one. We touch on a lot of things in the applications and special topics one, but nothing where they get immersed in it. So, and I see the comments. I'm going to copy and paste those so I can do a good report on this. But I have one more request and then I will let you go. If you have more comments, please email me. But at the bottom of that little agenda that I sent, we have an advisory board Survey Monkey link there. Would any of you be willing to go ahead, since you served as our advisory board for this round, for this fall? Would you go ahead and fill out that short survey? It doesn't take long at all, and that also helps our programming down at Indian Hills. And I want to thank you all for letting us do this during our meeting. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Debbie. Okay, Josh wants to talk about a new discussion group for elections.
Yeah, so since we amended the bylaws for how the board is going to be seated come this next round of elections at the in July, we need to kind of figure out exactly how we're going to run those, since we have both group representatives and at-large representatives. So we probably need to get a small group together to determine out exactly how we're going to do that, so then that way we can present something to the board as a whole come the start of next year, so that we can get that set up for elections come, April, May, because they will be seated in July. I do know that BJ, Penny, and Ben have said that they would be a part of this with myself and Micah. So essentially, the exec team, and then if there's anybody else who is interested in being a part of that, essentially we'll probably do it all through email. It could be done that way. If you're interested, let me know either in the chat or via email, and we'll get something set up to do that. That is all.
Looks like Robin's volunteered, unless she's just logging in now. Okay, great. A new committee discussion that I threw in there, something that I picked up out in Utah. They have what's called UMET, Utah Mapping Emergency Technical Team. But I thought, hello, this is something we could use here. I don't know how many of you work with an emergency management person in or near, in your facility, in your county, whatever. And I want to throw this out to ICIT as well. But my thought is, if we have an emergency here that requires heavy GIS support, I cannot work 24 hours a day, at 12, 14 max, I'm going to need somebody to step in and spell me out, because emergencies are 24 hours a day. And so also, if we have a disaster that wipes out our capability here, we're going to need a neighboring county. And Matt over in Story, the lovely Story County, and I have set up kind of a sharing thing where we access each other's online data. Each have an ArcMap user or something, or ArcGIS Online user, so that we can grab and create that emergency data if we need to. But I thought it might be nice to have a statewide tech team of people who have an interest in this type of emergency response for the next time we have a derecho or whatever, so that we could bring in some expertise and support where it's needed. These people probably would be taking the FEMA's NIMS courses, the incident management, and the ICS, the incident command, at least the basic courses. Those are available online. They're a thrill a minute, I assure you. Anyway, but if there's anybody else who gets excited when there's an emergency about what they can do as far as damage assessment, or creating search and rescue maps, or mapping the flood extent, or whatever kind of information that you can help with, help the local people out. Let's have maybe just an email to an IGIC email to let us know that you think yeah, we got a volunteer already. Good. But I think the county folks especially will be interested because a lot of them are responsible for this sort of thing if it happens. And not everybody is well trained and well versed and ready to roll on an emergency. And when it happens, it's not the time to try to get up to speed. So if any quick thoughts, do you think this is something we should tackle, a good idea, or you think it's something I should throw over at ICIT and it'll be a countywide regional kind of thing?
I know this was discussed previously, I think 2 years ago, and has just not gotten off the ground. So given the fact that it has been discussed numerous times and the idea keeps coming up, it's probably something that we do need to pursue. And it may be something that we want to engage with ICIT because they have a similar structure created for the IT side of things.
Right.
That's my 2 cents.
I agree.
Penny, Matt with Esri. Thank you for bringing this up. One, that derecho I guess it was over a year and a half ago.
Just over a year.
Yeah. We actually used that derecho and implemented quite a few changes to some of our solutions and offerings because of that. I mean, that was a storm that just got nationwide attention. I mean, people are still recovering from it. You guys know I'm preaching to the choir. But I think to what you said, that was a great example of one, you can't be working around the clock, and people that needed access to data and information that didn't think that they probably needed it ahead of time, needed to be stood up quickly. There are programs out there like DRP that are available to everyone. No cost, no questions asked. If anyone is in need of licensing during an emergency situation, let your account manager know, and we'll open the floodgates and you guys have access to licensing.
Yeah, and you did that for us. You gave us a bunch, like unlimited licenses, so I could grab what I had for the FEMA damage assessment and throw people out into the field. Homeland Security was using a statewide damage assessment app that looked remarkably like the one I had showed them the year before at a conference, and they set it up so I didn't have to provide support for mine anymore. We just used theirs, but it was immensely helpful. But it would have been nice to have people I could call in, because people were coming in with their phones, their personal phones, their personal tablets, and I had to get them set up with you're going to need to download the collector app at that time, and I need to get you a user and get you out in the field, get you going, and a little bit of training time, and it was a busy. I was working the main power was out. I had battery backup on my computer, so I'm sitting here in the dark in my office trying to get people set up and out in the field. It was an interesting time. Would have been nice to have a little help. So we'll put it together.
Yeah, and there are options. Again, everybody, talk to your account manager about trying to get some of that stuff set up ahead of time so that you guys, you're not downloading apps to people's phones during the emergency event. They already have those ready to go, which folks should have access to. And then you mentioned cities and counties. With the derecho, usually emergency management is, of course, a county and state function. But with that derecho, I mean, especially a Polk, I think I just saw Sunny come on in Cedar Rapids. I mean, there's so much inundation of the county resources that cities a lot. We're doing a lot of response, especially for that like initial debris removal and things like that, pulling in city public works.
Yeah, cities
that-
came to me as well for how FEMA wants this information. How can we gather that information and get it to FEMA and not have to go out with a clipboard and a paper? So, yeah, and then we lent them some equipment from the county as well, some tablets that I had already set up and had had the data on, had the applications on ready to go for them. So
Awesome.
then, but then it's just a matter of training and a few minutes and they were out the door. And
So I
So
just,
yeah,
this is Patrick. One of the things I just wanted, something that Matt mentioned, just about being up and running and that sort of thing is, looking at past events that you've done is, that have happened within the state and that sort of thing. And, sort of this need of where do things get reported to, what is the need, that sort of thing. But really looking at is there some sort of way that, from a county city perspective, coming up with some schema of data that is a reporting, this will be the reporting tool we use that's generic enough of, what is the incident type, name it, and this is not going to be comprehensive, but looking at, what is it, tree down or roof damage or something like that that can be generic enough. And there's probably stuff that's out
FEMA
there.
actually has some of that, or our Homeland Security has a damage assessment app. It does need training documents that go with it that, like you say, that explain to them this is minor damage, this is more major, and this is more major yet.
Yep. And then so actually implementing that and that this will be the standard that's used. And then also to finding some boundaries on, I think some bigger discussions of, is this very localized within multiple counties? What's that region, or is this a statewide event? And then trying to, figure out where does local reporting or local assistance kind of fit into that framework of the event that's going on. I think the derecho is a good example where I think some of that has gotten worked out, from a health perspective. I think within COVID, depending on the political atmosphere, there's, things can obviously change, but trying to figure out where some of that reporting lies within sort of this hierarchy that happens during an emergency management sort of situation. And you guys are far more versed in that than I am, but I'm just coming at it from sort of the state perspective and the little bits that I get dragged into. So
Does
the
that
other
mean
thing that you should be aware of is
you like to be
also,
involved in the group, Patrick?
I don't know honestly if I have time right now, Penny. I'd like to be aware of what's going on, but that's not it's not my area of expertise. And I'm coming at from kind of the same angle that you are of, you get pulled into situations and I'm a participant in those situations under certain conditions. But one of the other things that I think you should be aware of too is not just these natural disasters, but agricultural disasters as well. Looking at animal health and disease related issues, I think that's a huge one that's coming, up and coming that we don't really talk about very often, but it is something that, if I think looking at county government could easily get pulled into situations where you have to be enforcing quarantine areas, or putting out, local quarantine notifications and things like that. And it's something that we don't often think about, but it is, being an agricultural state, that's, derecho, top of my list on human health, and then the agricultural quarantine, disease epidemiology component is something we don't often talk about, but I think is huge.
Good things to think about. Okay, we'll get an email out to the group as a whole and probably reach out to ICIT as well and ask for people who are interested to join the group, and we'll get her set up and get her rolling. Okay, thanks everyone. Amy Logan wanted to mention a quick thing about our IGIC website, which seems to be not quite as updated as maybe we would like in certain areas.
Well, when Penny and I were getting things pulled together for the UGIC presentation, we noticed that that a lot of it is kind of getting out of date, and we were just thinking about different ideas on how we could get it updated, whether we can continue kind of with our volunteer efforts, or if we would want to maybe do some kind of bigger overhaul. I don't know, like having it somehow, you know, redesigned. I don't really have much to say beyond that, Penny.
Okay, perhaps we should put out a little poll. Think that is our website serving us well? If it is, how are we going to keep it up to date? Are we going to assign that as a task to a person? Do we need to hire somebody to do a little something with it? What do we think? I haven't honestly spent a lot of time on it. I occasionally grab meeting data or conference data or something from there. But other than that, oh, and once in a while I have to look up who's on the board.
I will say that given the number of years that we've had the website here trying to get people to assist and to put stuff up there has been pulling teeth. So, you know, I'm up for anything.
I would concur with Josh. Probably Josh and I are probably two of the people that have touched it the most in the last year or so. And I will be honest with you, it kind of flows and ebbs with the daily job. You know, there's a little bit of a learning curve, not a lot, but a little bit. And some decisions just have to be made. And sometimes, you know, you wonder if you have we just kind of make them in a vacuum. I would honestly say that we have $30,000 in the bank, and I think that there could be some value with throwing some money at something that has, you know, a real resource. And there's something to be said for a redesign with some very clear parameters and holding a third-party company to those parameters for a set amount of money and getting something done. And, you know, if we put a little money towards it, I think we're more likely to see some changes. Otherwise, it'll be like, yeah, people are interested, they can do it. And then, you know, we all get busy with our day jobs and it falls by the wayside.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing more than I can take on than what I'm doing.
I mean,
less, to be honest with you.
You know, and it's not necessarily, you know, a time. I mean, this would have to entail a deep look at exactly what we want on there and everything. Because I mean, there's stuff on there. There's meeting stuff on there from 2012 and earlier. That stuff doesn't need to be on there probably anymore.
Yeah.
Or Josh, it's an archive, and as long as it's searchable at some point, why not have it there? Because we certainly don't have a filing cabinet sitting somewhere. You know, it's our own, it's our history, and digital history is usually pretty easy to store. You know, so I'm just gonna throw that out there.
True.
Yeah, I think this is Lawrence. I think that we should probably have. I know everybody's busy, but if we could have a few of us meet to talk about what we need on there, because I know personally, I think about it. I wish it could be more of a resource as far as links to other places where there's data. I think that would be really nice. But yeah, there's a lot of things that's like you would wish was there, but it's like who has time to maintain such rich content that we wish was on there.
So sounds like we've got kind of a consensus that we need a little website team to look at it, make some recommendations.
So
and
we have a
do we have
website / communications
tech team?
committee. So
Who's
we
on it?
can utilize that and try to get more, and then essentially expand that out as to
Anybody who wants to volunteer to join our tech committee, just drop it in the chat, and then someone who's on that committee will take those names down and reach out to you. How's that?
So are we? I mean, is the thought then to us have somebody redo this completely and then they manage it, or is it they would essentially redo it and then the management would still be upon us after that?
I think we're not going to want to hire someone to do the management. I think we're going to, if we want to have to put on a meeting, we could put our agendas out there, whatever. But I think it could be, we should stick with managing it ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to run into a lot of money.
That's fine. I just wanted to verify the thought on that.
Josh, you and I have talked about it in years past, and I kind of agree with Penny in the sense that what really it's hard to get momentum to get started is because we know we need to go through the existing site and all the documentation and also reorganize how things are structured. And that's really a redesign of the website. And, if that was done, it's a lot easier to fill in the blanks when you're not worrying about like page structure in navigation issues.
Right.
And I feel like having a consultant that would help us with that, they wouldn't necessarily be as tied to things. So it might give us an outside perspective that we, might need.
It would be good to hire somebody for a redesign, redevelopment sort of thing, and then and have our committee be the one. We've got a lot of volunteers, so that's great.
Does anybody have any people know of anybody that other organizations have used?
Well, the ones I'm familiar with are geared towards government sites specifically, but there's a million companies that do online media. I guess the bigger question is, anyone really recommended one?
Yeah, if you have a recommendation, throw that in too, or email.
I will say I went through a county redesign from being like a homegrown or like a one person, local guy who could do some programming website, in going to a national company that there's expertise in government sites was the best decision ever made regarding the county's website, because that's what they do. And, a nonprofit organization site is kind of the same thing. I mean, we have a lot of the same mission as a million other nonprofits, and there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. And I abhor the idea of anything that's like homemade, because those are impossible to maintain,
right.
And are need too much tweaking. So, it could be approached, if our committee kind of came together and kind of said, let's research a few that deal in nonprofit organizations, maybe put out a bid, request for a proposal, and we could get some costs, and then we just come to the board and say, this is what it's going to cost. And it's a pretty straightforward procedure. Like Amy said, you get another person involved or another company involved, it can go really smoothly, because we're not trying to do anything that like 50 other state GIS organizations aren't doing, plus 5 million nonprofits. What's our mission? What are our goals? How can we be a resource for our members? How do we do communication? I mean, it's some basic nonprofit stuff.
Sounds good.
I'll shoot out a list I'll shoot out an email to the main list and get anybody else that would be interested, and then add on.
Maybe we could at the next meeting have either some recommendations or yeah, make our next step or something.
Right. So tech team people, and all you volunteers, get yourselves together, make an email group, and go ahead and look it over, see what needs to be done, make some recommendations. Come to us with a recommendation budget for it in hand at the next meeting. How's that? Okay. Onward. Any other project, conferences, representatives, regional user groups? Time to put your 2 cents in.
This is Ben Wagner. I guess I can give an update on the Eastern Iowa Regional User Group. We haven't been able to, due to COVID, we haven't had meetings the last year or this year. We typically have those in October or early November, somewhere in that area. We are currently looking at maybe having one in April or May. But yeah, that's still in flux. But yeah, we're still hoping to be able to do something depending on what COVID ends up doing over the winter season.
And the same thing with CHOW too, the Central Iowa ARC User Organization. We've kind of just haven't had anything for obvious reasons too. So yeah, maybe it's good to hear you guys meeting in April or May. Maybe we'll kind of think about that too, so we can do it at similar times or something. So but yeah, I guess if anybody has a need to to do something with Central Iowa, let me know. But we'll just kind of keep that on the back burner for now.
One thing that we can keep in mind with those is that in the past, IGIC has kind of supported those meetings with refreshments or something. So when the time comes, I would say don't be afraid to ask.
That's a good note. Good note. And Josh had a great idea. Let's make Slack channels for all of our new groups to get together and communicate with each other without having to do the email chain thing.
This is a great way to push people to, use Slack and get a little more familiar with the technology if you're not used to it.
We just do have to remember that some people won't use it, so utilize both.
No, I think the group has to. I'm going to disagree with you again, Josh, respectfully. And that's fine, but either use email or use Slack, like the hybrid for let's say we're talking about upcoming elections or something, and trying to make sure we have the format, trying to navigate in both. As a group, whatever the committee is, I always promote a Slack channel, but if they really want to do things by email, do it by email. Just, it's hard to do both. You miss stuff.
Well, I was meaning for the main stuff, not.
Oh yeah,
not
notifications.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Or if you've got, if you're trying to find information out, and you put it on Slack, there's still more people to the email list than there is on Slack. So you may get a better response there.
All right. Anything else before we wrap it up? Almost on schedule. Pretty exciting for my first meeting. I think this was great today, people. I think we got a lot of interesting topics discussed, some important decisions made, some groups formed that are going to do more great work. And I look forward to seeing some of you at Oktoberfest tomorrow. Is that tomorrow already? And others will be back here on the WebEx in 3 months.
When's the next Lunch and Learn, Micah?
Next week, Wednesday.
What's the topic?
It is Sorry, I should have had this ready to go and I didn't. I think it's another, we're gonna kind of wrap up, yeah. Arthur Crawford with Esri is also gonna be talking about LiDAR and 3D imagery. And then in November,
And that's a good presentation. I've heard Arthur present at least once, several times. So
you know, I'm not sure I have a topic for November to get on that. I've got some ideas. I might be reaching out to a few of you guys. There
Well,
was
that
some-
means we could do our UGIC thing.
Yeah,
since
let's
it's
do
still
that. Thank you. Yeah, see, it's also so. And that will be, I'll send that out after this meeting because I don't know. I'll just do it after this meeting. And that one will be the 17th. We'll do it the third week so we avoid the week of Thanksgiving.
Did I already send you a meeting thing for that one, Micah?
I don't know. I'll bug you. Yeah, it looks like you have.
Okay.
I got it. We're good. If not, I'm not shy. And then I think for December, we're throwing around, I think we're gonna do some kind of a show and tell, lunch and learn. What was it we were talking about, Penny? Like a kind of a round robin. I'd like to narrow the topic down a little bit, but maybe we'll touch on some
like a
ArcGIS.
lightning round.
Yeah, kind of the end of the year, kind of a year in review. What have you done this year? Something kind of thing. Maybe we'll try to focus on like ArcGIS Online stuff or just online tools or crowd survey. I don't know. So definitely like a show and tell. Maybe we'll just all drink, have a Christmas party. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Close the door, open the bottle. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We have a little time to nail that one down. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
We do need a motion to adjourn. Next
I'll
meeting
move.
on January 19th. Who said that?
Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
This is Debbie. I'll second.
Debbie seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks, guys.
Great talking to you all. See you
Hey,
later.
Micah, would you put the lunch and learn info for next week in the Slack channel?
Yes. Yep.
Thanks. See everybody.